It is wonderful, Governor, that you're here. Enjoyed that enormously. I mentioned to the governor that he holds a special place in the pantheon of my family because my cousin Roanne was appointed to the bench. She's the second most famous Sragow. I'm the third. Her brother Michael is a film critic you may know of. And I wish he'd been elected. I really do. The answer to California, by the way, is I think, I say this is a fifth generation Californian, that we don't trust government at all. And a lot of people think of us as liberal. We're not. We're very libertarian. And I've got a bunch of folks in the audience who are my students at SC. I teach one course each semester at SC. And I talk about how the fundamental political culture in California is that government cannot shoot straight, and you therefore want it to do as little as possible, and therefore you starve it, and we have succeeded fairly well at that. And that's why the 2/3 vote. Very different notion than what people in the East believe about government. The governor mentioned the Electoral College. I worked on the Hill for Birch Bayh, who wanted very much to undo the Electoral College. It is obviously an anachronism that produces bad results every once in a while, and not to mention Al Gore by name, which is, you know, another person who should have been the president of the United States, and in fact was elected president, but didn't get to serve. The governor talked about the absurdity of the way we select our presidential nominees, which this year I think is turning out to actually not be so bad. But if you came down from Mars and looked at how we picked the most important person to govern this planet, it's a very strange way to do things, and we don't always get the right result. Regional primaries certainly make some sense. Grassroots, very important. The first campaign that I managed in California was Alan Cranston's re-election in 1986, which he won by 104,868 votes to be exact, because we made a decision in that campaign that we would rely very heavily on television and all the stuff you're used to seeing, but that we would also run a very massive grassroots campaign run by a guy who is an icon in the political world, and some of you in the room would know Marshall Gans. And we did very much what you talked about, and Alan sat there that night, and we sat there, actually we sat there all night. We sent Alan to bed. It was like 7 in the morning the next day before we knew we'd won, and it was because of the grassroots effort, literally because of the grassroots effort. I am very excited by this cycle, by what's going on right now. I think it's great, not just because the front runners for the Democratic Party are a woman and an African-American man. I mean, if you want to talk about leaping about 2 centuries politically in this country, we've just done it. But because I actually can walk out on the street and talk to normal human beings who don't live and breathe and eat this stuff like those of us up here do, and they are excited about this race. They like the choice they're being given, they like the candidates, they're intrigued, they really care. And I think that the lesson there, which we tend to forget, and it's a very broad point, it applies to how we draw district lines in California and a lot of other things, is that competition works not just in the American economy, but in the American political system. And I think that one of the greatest tragedies in the political system in recent years, during much of my lifetime, has been that we have done everything we can to avoid competition in the political marketplace. I think that is very sad. I think we have engaged a whole new set of voters in the democratic process, small d, and the Democratic Party, big D. I think that irrespective of who the nominee is, we have an obligation to Barack Obama's support base to treat his candidacy fairly and with respect, to treat them with respect. And I worry that if this delegate count stays close, we may accidentally wind up with a situation where in Denver in August, it's down to what the unpledged superdelegates are going to do. I'm worried that there's going to be the appearance of a backroom deal. I'm worried that if as I think is going to happen, Hillary Clinton winds up the nominee, and I'm not taking sides, I just think that's what's going to happen, that if we are not careful, we will infuriate a lot of people whose hopes we got up. So I take the Obama campaign very, very seriously in terms of what it's done for the party and for the country. The choice on the Democratic side is, I think, fairly clear, and it is a fair choice, and it is an important choice, and it's a pivotal choice for this country. If you are someone who wants fresh ideas, wants to do things differently, willing to take a chance, a bit of a risk to get that done, you are going to be a supporter of, obviously, Barack Obama. If, on the other hand, you are concerned primarily about security, and I think most Americans have been petrified ever since September 11th of 2001, if you're concerned about the threats overseas, and now if you're concerned about our economic security, you've got somebody who has proven that she's a tough, strong, and relatively experienced leader, and that's Clinton. And I think you've got a lot of voters who aren't looking at this as a beauty contest and who's cuter and who's funnier. I mean, you know, Obama is clearly a very engaging personality. I think probably Hillary Clinton is a fairly polarizing personality in some ways, but I think voters are genuinely trying to decide whether we want somebody new and fresh and different to deal with what the 21st century is like on this planet, or whether we face some real peril and we're better off with somebody who's strong and protective. And I think that's what this election is all about, and I think therefore it's an extremely important election and the stakes are very high. John McCain appears to be the Republican nominee. We'll let Alan talk about John McCain. I'm frankly relieved, and Alan's heard me say this before because we do this fairly often, because of all the Republican candidates for President of the United States, I think he's the only one who's remotely ready for prime time. And I don't want to lose to him. I want there to be a Democratic president, but I figured John McCain could probably handle the job, and I think the rest of them couldn't. And we've just lived through 8 years with somebody who cannot handle the job of president, and that scares me a great deal. So there's a lot to talk about. I do want to just briefly mention, with Charlie and Judy up here, and that we've got to get to tonight the role of the various groups that make up California. Tonight's focused on Asian Americans. We all know that's a misnomer because there's lots of different kinds of Asian Americans, and it's important not to lump them together too quickly. But this is now a minority white state. The electorate is still majority white because it's just a question of time before that changes. A lot of the new Californians are too young to vote or not eligible to vote because they're not yet citizens. But there is a dramatic, fundamental shift going on in this country. In California, we always lead that sort of thing, and I think we ought to talk about that a little bit tonight before we adjourn. So that's my starting place, and now it's your turn to rebut.